How Human Life Began, a comprehensive survey. After the first man was born and learned how to think, he immediately started making things more complicated. The whole idea of secret knowledge would lose much of its pizzazz if the situation was seen not as one of info being hidden, but of men being too dense to see it. Your mind is your glory, except under two conditions. One is when it won't be quiet, and two is when it's getting its fuel from an outside source. And all interested parties should take note that the mind is never quiet and is totally dependent on outside fuel supplies. The really interested should further check out the possibility of extending the everyday store hours of perception. When things don't seem connected, you have two choices. One is that you're incorrect and they are connected, or two, you can just forcibly kind of squish them together, and like that. On the great inner adventure, when you unexpectedly feel like you just can't go on, you have two possibilities. And both of them are complex concepts driven by ultra-obvious and direct fuel and spelt exactly the same. Only ordinary people care what happens to everyone else. And that's only because they're forced to. Only ordinary people care what happens to everyone else. That's because they're ordinary. Only ordinary people care what happens to everyone else, and that's only because they talk about it. Yeah, that's right, because they're forced to talk about it. If there actually is such a creature as a mystic, then he'd surely have to have at least this one distinguishing characteristic. He wouldn't be forced into anything. Human things he'd do because of being supremely human. And now today's spiritual lesson and quiz. Why don't cats go to heaven? Because there's no reward for cats being cats. While thumbing through some CDs, a man said, "You know, I've gotten to where I don't like hearing recordings of performers who are no longer alive." And his friend replied, "Yeah, I've started feeling the same way about authors." And a man standing nearby, overhearing this, turned and gave his mind a most unusual look. Genes care for family, and life looks after the herd. But who's to see to an individual's mind save himself? The comment that covers how mental accounts stay balanced in city condos as regards those living in the basement. That's the intro. Here's the comment. The sex is in the mail. It's not all. A man asked his baker, "Is it possible to live in the present and yet in the past simultaneously?" And the yeasty one replied, "Not if you're not normal with residency in more than one time zone." Moral: it's hard enough to stay upright using two legs. Just imagine what it's like to have three. Anyone who believes that there is any moral to reality would believe that the sex is in the mail. Time for a define. Talk, as ordinarily practiced by the ordinary. Sport for the unsportsmanlike. The human mind can be like a record stuck in one spot, spinning on a turntable that never stops. "Daddy, I want a CD player as my intelligence." "My son, that's right insightful and contemporary of you to prefer a digital storage system over an analog one. A vast improvement in memory retrieval potential." "Nah, It's just I want one because I don't have one, plus it'll cost you to get me one. Why, son, that's downright cute and shitty of you to have such an attitude. And they commenced to throw good-natured fake blows at one another as they each privately pondered the possibility of somehow extrapolating some kind of moral from all of this. But alas, 'twas not to be, for reasons, I think, quite obvious. And recapping our top story, the human mind can be like a record store stuck in the same spot until the neighborhood completely runs to ruin and they double your rent. Regardless or not whether it is part of human history, known history, everything that man can and could have done, he's done. Everything that is, but this kind of thing. As necessary proof of his continuing distinction, a mystic unilaterally triples his own rent every few years or months. Definition again. Rituals. Complex efforts simplified. Way too much. The individual part of one guy's brain looked out at the collective part and thought, it's tough to be popular when you have no peers. It pushed this a bit further and added, but then again, non-peers never recognize their status, so how comes this to be? The independent part pondered even onward until it was face to face with the realization that how things are don't necessarily always respond to questions about itself. The independent part of that man's mind was tickled to see this and took the joy quite personally and as useful. Gang definitions. Psychologist. Sociologist afraid of crowds. Theologist. Priest afraid of crowds. Power brokers. Politicians afraid of crowds. Collective thought. Mind's afraid of everything. Well, everything new, unexpected, or stimulating. A man asked his doctor, is the stimulating always controversial? Only if you talk about it, he replied. Question, in the long run, who's actually worth more to life? An outlaw or a mystic? Answer, don't ask. One homeowner says, for a while they were making noise in front of my house. Then after I complained, it started coming from behind my house. Now I'm hesitant about saying anything else about it. Wouldn't you be? Another happy comment from another satisfied resident. Or, an alternative way to look at it, when it comes to everyday neighborhood 7-Eleven thinking, if he could, a mystic would hold himself up every day of the week. Psychology shot out of a botanical cannon. The human mind is the world's only flower that can thrive simply off the fumes of a septic tank. The International Body Lobby registers the strongest possible complaint to this. Yeah, boy, don't they wish it could speak and raise such objections. Yeah, but why, even if it could, would it stoop so low? Now on to some real hip city news. One way to show how modern you are in your thinking is to discuss the increasing evidence of a direct connection and interdependence between man's mind and his body. This is also, at no additional expense, a way to display the laggardly condition of your personal perception. And now on to today's news of psychology. This particular item headed, The Counselors and the Committed. There is quite a difference between being a rat and being a rat catcher's daughter. Yes, quite a difference, but not quite enough. That's why they make them wear the white coats, even though they don't operate. Or it's another story. Before giving up his normal life and all of its incidentals, a man stood before the monastery door and addressed the head monk. Will the grand undertaking equal the joy of fine wine and drinking? Will the supreme struggle match the ecstasies of sex and sport? Will the great experience itself surpass all of the other pleasantries of life? And the monk said, will you shut up? The king sat and thought, if squirrels are just rats with better PR, then maybe mysticism is simply insanity camouflaged. This gave him some comfort, at least more than when he used to wonder if transcendental thought was actually a cover for insurrection. Of course, a few know that it's all the same. The few, that is, with nothing more to lose. Only those of non-local mentation can talk to the dead. But the way in which they do this, you wouldn't recognize as communication. Plus, they don't have the same definition of the dead as you do. Plus, they call collect. On this one world, they have a saying that goes, friends don't let friends go off to other planets while drunk or disoriented. How come you don't have such a catch-all in your own mind? Dumb people are straightforward people. They have no choice. And in this context, straightforward is not to be confused, over 2 amps, with any form of individual intelligence. Docile cows in the midst of a stable herd will believe anything they hear, or else reject it. Which to bovinal brains is all the same. Quite simple and straightforward. Minds are moons. Mystical thought, orbits. Specialized health watch. Mental hostility is a morbific form of gravity for would-be astronauts. The reason that talk is so interesting and meaningless is that it's a perfect reflection of civilization. A man asked his plumber, is the interesting always meaningless? Only if it has to do with the mind, he regurgled. One man could make himself sick just by thinking about it, while another man could just be by being himself. A man asked his accountant, what does this have to do with anything? If I were you, I'd switch from a calendar to a fiscal year and transfer those capital investitures to an offshore dummy corporation. And the man asked, you mean like my brother-in-law? And the accountant replied, what are professionals for? And the man didn't know. The reason that, and the man didn't know. Okay. The reason that talk is so interesting and meaningless is that it is a perfect reflection of civilization. Oh, I'm sorry, we just did that one. Intelligence, as practiced by the ordinary. Intelligence, accepting or rejecting what others have said. Is it any wonder that mystics have been viewed as so deranged? To prove his superiority to other creatures, for every time his dog turned around 3 times, as one man would turn around 4 before he lay down. And what was the moral and final line to Aesop's very last fable? Ooh, it sure is dark in here. Self-effacement re-examined. Man has 2 ears and only 1 tongue, so that he can get screwed twice by what he hears for every 1 time he can complain about it. The kid of one mystic one day thought, the actual best thing about ancient wisdom is that, just like with old people, it's easier to knock down and kick around. While strolling in the garden one afternoon, the king stopped and thought, just what the hell does the church need an army for anyway? And from behind an arbor, the choir began to sing. Or you can knock me down, step in my face, test my power from place to place, do anything that you want to do, but don't let a country be governed by 2. No. And some mystics who had been laying in a daisy bed quietly slipped out holding their head. How to handle visiting relatives. If you talk long enough, everybody will eventually leave. How to handle routine thoughts. Same way. Oh yeah, you can in both instances also use the silent treatment. How to tell if you belong in activity like this. If you hate riding this bus, just imagine how you'll despise flying. When dead, the ordinary are buried in a mass grave. Same too while they're alive. Civilization. What a concept. What a bargain. What a thoroughly delightful place to escape from while you still have the chance. The grasp of the great mystery begins with the great hunger, and likewise continues. The same as with fleas. If you talk about problems, you'll have problems. Those of you with pets or in the pest control business can dispute this all you like, but for whom the bell tolls is goose for the gander. Even more hallmarks highlighting the distinction between mystics and the ordinary. Weird stuff fascinates simple people, while simple stuff fascinates weird people. Weird people, of course, being mystic. A man asked his gardener, how come there are more young weird mystics than old ones? And the weedy one replied, but there are not more older ones. So the man said, okay, so what if there were? Then what would it be? And the lawn lay-tician replied, so you want to get, what do you call that stuff? Manure? No, it's something else. Philosophical? No, maybe it was manure. One man used to dream that everything was connected, only to awaken and see that it was not. Then he began to dream that everything was unconnected, and would awaken to discover that it was. He soon caught on to what was happening and quit dreaming altogether. Moral: you can lead a mind to horses, but you can't make it bet. Before committing himself to the great adventure, a man stood before the monastery door and addressed the head monk. What is this grand undertaking but the attempt not to ever again undertake the moot and meaningless? What is this supreme struggle but the effort not to foolishly struggle? What is the mystical experience but a clear comprehension of everyday life simply as it is? And the monk said, what are you, a nut? Shut up and come on in if you're coming. Yeah. Those who know the secret also know an even greater one. The news of civilization, as defined from a mystic's perception, exhaustive coverage of uninteresting events. A man asked a guy who had made a comment regarding how a mystic might look at something, "Who are you to say what a mystic is and how he might behave?" And the guy replied, "Would you have ever thought of what I had to say about it?" And the man said, "No." And the guy said, "I rest my case." And the chorus began to sing, "I rested my case on the bosom of Absalom." Oh, by the way, while you were out, some people acted more civilly. Some people acted more civilly than others. Oh, the bosom of Bethlehem. If I were any of you with more than a high school education and had been more than 50 miles out of town, on your sake, for your sake, I would feel chagrined and embarrassed too. That's why I gave you the opportunity to keep looking for you to go ahead and laugh like, "Oh, now I get it." At the appearance of the deposed king, one of the townspeople so spoke, "My, how the mighty have fallen." And a warrior standing nearby thought, "And my, how the simplistic project and levitate their own fears and uncertainties into human form above their own heads, only to moan and rejoice in its inevitable downfall." The difference between the ordinary looking to a God for help and a mystic looking at reality for information is that the ordinary want to hear a voice say, "Take two of anything and you'll be all right in the morning," while a mystic doesn't want to hear from anybody with mere advice. You see, my boy, that's the great thing about the obvious. It doesn't have to hint or allude to anything. A validity of currency update. To a mystic, all promises are funny money. Life runs life, and you can either do your job and keep quiet, or try to quit and collect unemployment, or try to burn the building down and thus commit gradual suicide, or one man told his roofer, "When I die, put on my headstone the inscription, and or." And the tarry one replied, "Is that to be one or two headstones?" And the man was suddenly struck anew with the power, the beauty, the balance, and the griminess of a well-polarized mind. The difference between a mathematician and a mystic is that a mystic knows how to really count where it counts. As a reward for something or the other, local conditions offered one man his choice of becoming either king of the stomach or pontiff of the heart. And the man responded, "Since your offer didn't include Magnus of the mind, could I instead just get a set of luggage or a gift certificate?" On a certain little used roadway, the sign that used to say "yield" has been replaced with one that says, "Don't be stupid." A mystic's greeting card says nothing, and its slogan is, "When you care enough to send the best." Yeah, I know it's already been used, but here the emphasis is different. One man thought he had been viciously attacked by some ferocious Rottweilers, but it turned out to just be something he ate, which turned into something he thought. "Hi, handsome, live around here?" "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, just upstairs from here." "Upstairs? I didn't know this place had an upstairs." "Well, maybe that's why we've never run into each other before." Upstairs? Upstairs? I can't believe I never noticed it.
Yeah.
One comely miss renamed her mezzanine level the Bow Wow Room. That's right. Keep laughing like you actually understand it. Huh? And now, how life began on one planet. Well, things started out pretty simple, but stayed that way. And to tell you the truth, not much actually resembling life ever got much of a toehold. And now a special feature, how to locate a mystic's house anywhere. He'll be the one who always has neighbors on both sides who can count to 2. And now for tonight's final death feature. The burial of one Ural Knight is yet to be completed, since they still cannot get the smile off his face sufficient to close the coffin. Oh yeah. Those of you so inclined may ask yourself if it is not time to consider updating your conception of just what constitutes demise, happiness, and finality. One man spent 20 years writing, then 20 years editing the writing, and finally 20 erasing. No. The way you could tell the actual leader of this one band of knights was that when things got dangerous and promising, he was the first one not to say anything. To help flog their cheesy merchandise, sleazy salesmen used the trick of continually addressing you by name throughout the pitch. Shh. Did I just hear life calling you? Or as a news item could have said, I shouldn't muck up my own finish, but life is your friend, except when it has it in for you. Before we get around to anything that might possibly be new or meaningful, from last time, picking up the broad question of using as an operating premise that there is some reality to the idea of secret knowledge, grand tradition, secret work, etc., and that it is, as oftentimes suspected, would have to be the core, the continuing fuel source of all religion, and those of you getting better eyesight, of everything human, civilization itself. And it is reflected over and over and over and over and over in all of man's myths, from north to south, east to west, all cultures, all religions, and non-religions. About there being some word, there was some initial connection between the gods of creation and man. And that in some way it got lost at the verbal level. They got lost amongst the ordinary, that no one now can remember, since in the Western version, you can do it all the way from the original comedy club being the Garden of Eden, and then life decided, I got to get serious quick, and it threw man out. And he hadn't laughed since, that is, he forgot what it was, or you can move on a few more pages into the Old Testament and look at it as being the mythical cut-off line of the Tower of Babel. But if you can read it a certain way, it is everywhere. It is in the old Buddhist literature. It is in Chinese mythology, even older than the Judaic-Christian tradition, that in some way at one time there was a man, their own version of an Adam, like the first time, the first creature, the thinking creature, commonly known as man. When he was the first one created, the creator, the force, the God, had obviously a personal connection, if we're going to use 3D reality, that he created him, and there it was. And since then, at the public level, at the commonly recognized level, whatever it was that they talked about, whatever information, or even whatever obvious awareness, that if there was some force, the good old god of Mexican velvet painting, and he went boom and made a man, then right there it was just him and the man. And so even if they didn't say anything, you understand, there was a direct experience that we're lacking. So if there is this kind of grand tradition, if there is this kind of secret info or secret work or secret knowledge, the question I presented to you was, if that be true, as many people have suspected, all the way from the world of academia to the world of active would-be mystics, then why is it not more popular? Why is it not at least as popular as religion itself? If religion is some sort of cover, camouflage, outer shell, and that their suspicion is correct, then why even just their suspicion of it? Why is it not more popular? Why is it not more practiced, pursued, or at least as much as the religions themselves? Which is more or less where we were last time. It's not, but what are you going to do? You're supposed to laugh like, oh, I understood that. Well, see, my fear is that you think, well, is it? Either that or, no, it's not. So that's where we left off. That's where we left off last time. And I was going to get into specifics that at a very practical level, the reason that it is not is that religion, parentheses, civilization, but religion as our singled out example right now, as that religion offers simple answers, reminding you again that is not a pejorative description. It simply offers simple answers, direct answers, apparently, and simple methods, / rituals, / own tradition. Whereas what would appear to be this core, if we're going to dance around the mulberry bush and me say I suggest and etc., we can do that, or I'm just telling you it is. When it is operating at its best, it does not offer any simple answer. And it certainly doesn't offer simple methods to apparently pursue the answer. These are two different things, even though they are evidently or eventually connected. You understand, all religions offer simple answers, all the way from their basic answer, whatever it might be, however they care to describe it. If you said, what's the meaning of life? And they say, to serve Allah. What's the meaning of life? To serve God. What's the meaning of life? To submit to the will of the universe. And so they have an absolute simple answer. And if you say, well, how can I be happy? And they say, well, to be a Buddhist, to follow the Hindu way of life. Those that apparently would ask for more then want to know something about a practice, that they are not satisfied with the theology of religion, with a small t, the philosophy of religion. They're not satisfied with just information. They may not dispute it, but they would be the ones that we're getting closer to now, who would be on the edge of having very strong personal suspicions that there is some sort of secret core, or should have been, or that one time was, to religion. And so their attitude, I'll express in words, is there is more than just the answer of the purpose of life is to serve God. Okay, I'll let that go. But what I want to know is, behind all that, I still strongly feel, I am convinced that there is some sort of practice, there was some sort of way that even after we lost the original connection with creation, with a God, even after we went into the second generation, which put us, by its own definition, by its own description, a generation away from the face-to-face confrontation with creation. After his sons came along, they did not have the same relationship. Plus, throwing in the story that God had already run them away from him, turned them away from the face of God. But beyond all that, even if God was still hanging around the garden, and Adam was, by the time you got to his sons and his grandsons, simple look at your, right quick, the way your reality is now, your relationship to your grandmother, your great-grandmother, is not the same as your mother's was. They would not have the same kind of living experience with creation. So it's obviously, if you don't want to call it lost, they would obviously feel as though I am now many generations removed from Adam, from the confrontation with the creation of reality as we know it. There is, no matter what descriptions they use, along a part and parcel of the belief and some secret knowledge, that there have been methods still handed along, let's say through Adam's line, that he told the grandchildren, he told his children before he died, hey, if you go do so-and-so, and I'm just going to make up something, and I hope nobody takes it too serious. Let's say he said, listen, if you ever want to try and get back in touch, me and God used to speak. And I don't want to go into it, but there was a certain unpleasantness. Anyway. But anyway, I knew so much before it all happened. I found out, and he tells them something like, if you go and on a certain day of the year, when the sun's just right, when the moon's just right, the planets are just right, if you stand on one foot and you get under that tree that has that fruit that has a red and a green stripe to it, and if you'll take one from the lowest branch on your left, and if you'll stare directly at the North Star, and if you'll try and count your breaths, and just to further notice, God cannot resist. He will eventually say, and he will speak, and you'll be in communication. That is the sort of thing that people do, except those that have this stronger suspicion, this stronger hunger than just the simple answer that the purpose of life is to serve God. They will know, I'd like to, that's all right, I don't complain about that, but what I want to do is talk to him. I want to be back in touch, originally, to use Adam against allegory, the would-be mystics now, of whatever religion, I'm just using, as you understand, Adam as a mythical paradigm, they would say, I believe there's something else. I'm not disputing that the purpose is to serve God. Okay. But I want to be in the same kind of relationship that Adam was, and I'm just convinced there's something we could do, because there's still part of me. Adam's in me. Adam's in everybody. There's still a piece of it here, and so whatever the real physical, whether they would want to say it or not, genetic, the DNA, the connection between the Adam and God, that there's still at least a little minute piece. To begin with, the connection was all of Adam, all of Adam's total atoms. Was that direct connection between God and Adam? There was no real difference other than the finger, the little spot. And so you could say, I don't know how many atoms Adam had. I can't remember how many atoms humans have. Let's say 100 billion. Then the would-be mystic now would be within his rights and could say, to use my kind of made-up example, he could say, to begin with, the ratio between God and Adam was in perfect time. It was in real time, and the ratio was 1-to-1. And that Adam was aware of God and creation, the reality of life, to the point of 100 billion atoms. So now, I'm that far removed, and it may only be one of my atoms. It's still part of his. But you understand, as long as I've got one, there is some communication still going on, which is true. Even if you forget religion and mysticism and all that. It's still got to be true. You are a piece of either Adam or Lucy or Dr. Schleckel. Whoever was mother and father, you're still a piece of them. You understand that? I mean, if you've seen photographs of them, you thought, boy, I don't look at all like her or him. They don't have the same name as me. Could be, but you do understand there's some small piece of them in you, or you wouldn't be alive. So the idea of mysticism and the idea of rituals and methods is based upon that. It is not just foolishness and not just dreams. Because if you have any idea that there's some... Anyway, it's not foolishness. It's to dismiss the collective's ritualistic attempts vis-a-vis religion and drugs and other things, to just dismiss it as being baseless is foolishness on your part. Because there is a reality to it, a physical reality, which I'm trying to generally point towards. So the idea, the hunger for some method, is based upon that kind of hunger beyond the simple answer of saying whatever the religion said of the purpose of life is to serve God. The hunger beyond that turns into mysticism or attempted mysticism is, okay, serve God. But what I want to do is get back in touch. Because all of this serving God, or some religions call it worshiping God, whatever they say, you could look at as being a kind of childish dismissal or a kind of make-do work a kind of distraction. It's like kids in a classroom maybe saying, they start discussing zoology, and somebody says, well, I have got to see a platypus. I want to see a platypus or a dodo worse than anything in the world. And the teacher said, well, we can't go see a platypus, plus she hates to break the news about dodos to them anyway. And she said, we can't go, the nearest platypus is at the Indianapolis Zoo, and we don't have the money to go there. And so what, here, I'll get a book with a photograph of it. And you understand, a kid could look at it, and the teacher says, trust me, this is a platypus, and I can spell it. Look, it says right there. It's an official textbook, Encyclopedia Britannica. Trust me, this is a platypus if it says this. And you can look at it and think, well, all right, I believe it. But I wanted to pet one. I wanted to hold it. That's sort of getting to the point of the would-be mystics. It's like, all right, I'll accept we want to serve God. You say, so I find my be. If that's the church's answer, if that's this religion's answer, I accept it. It's to serve God, it's to look at God, it's come here and say, hooray for God, to honor God. Okay. But I want to pet one. I don't want to just look at, I don't come here and just look at stained glass things up there of a platypus on a cross or a platypus kneeling out and praying by a big old rock on black velvet. I want to pet one. The reality of that amongst a wide swath of people, the reality of that is what has created mysticism, the word. And we're not talking about the deranged, we're not talking about people who do harm to themselves, we're talking about those who would still fit, by all appearances, into the sane middle class of humanity, of the collective of humanity, and yet they have this kind of hunger. Whether they ever find the right word for it, most people die without even forget finding out how to do it. They never even find a word that satisfies them. They never even find a description. They just know, yeah, and they keep hearing it described as this and that, and they go, yeah, that's it, and then they read about it, or they go hear about it, or they go pursue whatever cult or group it was, and they go, well, Jesus, it sounded like it. But then again, when you first went to church, it sounded like it. The hunger is real. The desire is real, and it is physical. So why do people put up with, to put my question to you another way, why do they tolerate, why will they put up with that which religion offers? If there is a real core to the religion, why will they put up with looking at pictures of platypuses if there is an actual platypus somewhere? Forget about how to get there and how long it'd take and how much trouble it is, and who the hell wants to go to Indianapolis anyway, but notwithstanding that, it is simply the question of, well, how can people tolerate it? Why do they put up with the fact of paying lip service, lip homage, to a photograph of a platypus if they are just convinced that the real thing exists? You understand that was a variation of my question. If there is a secret knowledge that is the fuel and the continuing core and life breath of religion, why is it not as popular? Of course, it should be more, but why is it not as popular as the shell itself? The religions not only and I didn't get to the simple rituals of religion, are very simple. You can pick them out, and they're more than I'm going to start to name, but prayer, a pre-written prayer, probably the simplest, along with some physical ritual. If you notice, all religions, you don't just pray, because that'd still be too close to the simplistic answer. To apparently get into an activity, to say, well, here's the prayer. In the Christian religion, I guess the Lord's Prayer. And they say, well, here it is, our greatest mystical, or our greatest religious, our greatest spiritual ritual and activity is prayer. And they hand you this piece of paper, the Lord's Prayer. That would strike a would-be mystic as being no more than, well, wait a minute, that's the same thing as me saying, what's the purpose of life? And you say, well, God, it's to serve God. In other words, this is not an activity. You're just handing me another idea. I'm not disputing. I've read it, and that's neat poetry. That is, it almost brings tears to my eyes, but I wanted to do something. And they go, oh, well, I thought you understood. When you pray, fall down to your knees. And if you're Catholic, you do this, and other religion, you got beads, and you do it. And you go, oh, think about it. That went from being, you understand that we're offering two possibilities, that religion, in the sense of what we're talking about, the interest, offers answers, but then it offers rituals, answers and activities. Most people, the answers are enough. Well, there's the archetype, I guess, being a little old widow woman in a shawl coming to Mass every day. And, she never asks questions. Her faith seems to be unshakable. Whatever the priest says, that the Bible says, whatever the priest says that God or Jesus said, she'll turn right around and repeat it. And at her age, she'd probably let him put her against the wall and shoot her before she would deny it. Well, if the priest says it, it's good enough for me. That is the heart of religion, by and large. But then if you expand it to those that say, well, I want more, religion is there to say, very good. And that's why I was trying to represent that. They say, well, here's a prayer. Here's a way you can participate. You don't just come and listen to us perform the ritual, the great sacred mystery, the Mass. And the person said, well, I want to participate. Then good. It shows that you're growing spiritually. So you don't have to just sit there passively. Here's a prayer for you to do. And at first you might think, well, now I'm really getting somewhere. Now I'm joining in. Until you realize, wait a minute, this is still just mental activity. And they go, no. As you pray the first line, you get on one knee. As you pray the second line, you go on both knees, and then you do this. And of course, Muslims and Jews, everybody's got their thing. You pray and you do this, or the Muslim, you get down, you face in a certain direction. I'm not making fun. They do it. No, they're certainly not making fun because it's not silly unless you're going to call life stupid. And I already point out to you, if you think life is stupid, you have missed the point. I mean, you missed the point big time. You may be the first instance of a man who can actually jump and miss the ground. Life is not stupid. But what I want you, well, you've got millions, as you know, billions of people right now doing all sorts of things that if it's not your religion, you can look at it and think, well, that's meaningless or it's silly. And it's not. It is part of collective life. But to consider that praying and doing something like that, or bowing a certain way, and, doing some sort of beads or making crosses, it seems as though you are now part of that you're participating in some activity, that you're not just passively sitting there watching something or listening to someone talk. Well, that is the simplicity that I was saying. Besides the answers is the activity, and there are all sorts of. I just picked out the obvious one: the lighting of the candles in the Catholic Church. Whatever the rituals are. Every religion's got a whole handful of rituals, but they are simple. You can do them. It does not require gymnastics. It does not require that you practice. To be a Muslim, them say, well, listen, when you pray, a Muslim does not stand up and pray. You've all seen it. You get down on your knees, you face Mecca, and you actually put your forehead down. And they give you the ideas of this, as witness, public witness of your total submission to Allah, showing your humanity and giving yourself. But there it is. But it does not require practice. It's not like that they say, well, go home. It may take you a long time. It's not like trying to sit in a lotus position. It's not like trying to sit and meditate until your mind stops. Anybody, unless you've got severe back problems or something. You can be a Muslim if that's all it takes. So you have to say, you repeat the ideas. Yes, there is no God but Allah. Muhammad's his messenger or whatever. They say, all right, you got the ideas. Now, you got to do the prayer 5 times a day or whatever. And you got to, get a compass. You can find out, go that way and do like I do. Get down, put your, all right. That's it. You don't have to go home and practice. That's it. But it does seem as though you have participated some. That I was going to let cover the simplicity of the answers and the activity religion offers. But if you get into that which would seem to be the bridge, the publicly known sides of mysticism, without me debating, I don't mean that it's worthy of debate or that I could debate it or argue it in any worthwhile manner. To take the aspects, the publicly called forms of mysticism, all the way from the mystical aspects of Christianity, the inner mystical tradition of Judaism, the Sufis in Islam, the mystical aspect of, if we're going to call it in the West, the Hindu religion or Buddhism. The mysticism is a little more up front. They did not see it as that great of a separation. The point being, from a Western mind, which is all I'm really addressing this to, the idea is that there would be, or that there has been and still continues to be, some publicly known forms of mystical activity that is not simply religion, as I have just been talking about, that there are forms. Not debating now, or not still arguing about how popular they are, or why aren't they more popular, but just the fact that they are. There are yoga schools, and I don't mean just for physical activity, but those that aspire to, claim to be, actually involved with the original spiritual meaning and supposed aim of yoga, and what the physical exercises and postures were for was not just to straighten out your back, but what they were for, all the way from that to whatever Zen school is going on right down the street in almost any city now. They may be operating after hours at a karate school, that the guy gets through teaching karate, especially if he has the appearance of being perhaps of Oriental inclination. After he gets through running the classes and teaching little kids to break bricks and stuff, then for a few extra bucks you stick around, and he may lead something of a more spiritual nature. It's not hidden, and they can quite easily slide into alluding to, referring to how this is, for those who are interested, what he's about to do now, the meditation, and part of it would just be descriptions of him going into the spiritual background, the spiritual core of the martial arts, or the ones he's teaching. That it's not just the attempt to ward off a physical attack. What it is the attempt to let the kind of forces that you would see as being adverse to you in life, is to be able to let them come at you, and not only you not run, but you not defend yourself in such a rigid manner as to that your own defense becomes your own adversary. All the way from that to, I'm sure there's a Zen school down the street in almost any place now besides that literally are trying to imitate the Zazen of having people actually sit, and we meditate. People can't do it full time. They come once or twice a week and they sit for 2 or 3 hours, wherever's available. They have the kind of literature that is not hidden from past Zen, quote, Zen teachers, Zen schools, saying that quite simply, here's the point of the practice, is to calm the mind. That if you calm the mind completely, you are suddenly plugged back into a direct connection with, and then after that you can call it anything you want to. The real Zen schools in the past didn't say God, but you can call it God if you wanted to, or you can call it reality, you can call it enlightenment. Then you have all of the ones that are still done and redone from more of what would appear to be the Middle East and the subcontinent, from the Hindu traditions, the Sufi traditions of attempting to remember yourself, remember to observe yourself, remember to repeat the name of God. And all of that is very captious. It pops up all over the world every blank number of years. It'll resurface with a slightly different name. And all it's about, not to dismiss it when I say all it's about, is a controlled focus of attention. It is almost the step brother or sister of the Zen practice, of trying to just sit and still the mind. And it's part of what's also involved. I wasn't intending to give some sort of lesson in yoga at its most mystical. Is doing the same thing. Although you're not just sitting immobile, you're doing it as aimed toward the same thing. The idea is also of trying to remember the name of God with each breath, or just trying to remember the breath. And then one of the later versions that still has widespread interest in Europe and the United States now, derived from that, was that the way to enlightenment, the way to some higher state of consciousness, is to continually be aware, beyond the workings of your own mind, to be aware that I exist. Sometimes referred to as self-remembering, continual state of self-observation. And it is, once you understand, it's the same thing as attempting to sit and calm the mind. It's the same thing as the real intense aim of yoga. It is the same intense of I'm not going anymore, but there are publicly known, whether you recognize it or not, ritualistic activities within Judaism, within Christianity, within the Mass, and I don't mean that the people involved even know what's going on. That's not the point. But it is based upon the same intent. It is it's an attempt, I'll drop willful for a minute. It's the attempt to focus attention. They would probably, most people even today, especially if we dug up old mystics, they would want to wrangle with that. They would say it was too simplistic. And I could say, you just think I'm giving it all away. The old ones wouldn't understand that. They'd go, what the hell does that mean? But even the ones now would go, no. Because you understand, once something has become ritualistic to the simple, it takes on magic. And so if someone now, to self-remember is a very common one. It's widespread use, and it's already had its own dogma, had its own origins here in the West, and has already split into factions. It has its own opposition. The term now is magical. So if I took someone who was now involved, if they believed that was the practice, the way to struggle individually towards some greater expansion or higher state of consciousness, and they said it's to have a continual self-awareness, to self-remember. That's their term, to self-remember. And I said, well, yeah, I know what it is. And what you're trying to do, if you're interested, is, and I could give them just what I've been talking to you about the last 4 or 5 minutes. If I thought they was interested, I could just say, you ever thought about, what, the attempt to sit and meditate and to clear the mind? I've read about it. And I said, well, yoga, yeah. Would you understand that and yours, well, they wouldn't like it already to compare it. Well, you're not supposed to, ordinary, because you're supposed to feel defensive. You suddenly want to call out the knights and go take Jerusalem back from infidels. Laugh like you get it. They get touchy and defensive as soon as it's compared to anything. But if I say, well, I didn't mean to compare it, I just wondered whether you realize that all of it is simply the attempt to focus attention. They would not care for it. For very good reason. I don't mean they're stupid. And I'm telling you, it's exactly the same thing. But you understand, if you have now taken that, if you were the kind of person trying to practice some semi-organized form of mysticism, and that you were attempting, that you had now accepted, and as good a method as any at that level, that you are now, your one aim in life, the one aim, and it seems to be the answer to everything. If you're inside of a school or a group that they said, the method, we're not talking about just ideas and theories, we're talking about something for you to do. And you go, yep, that's what it is. You have got to continually remember yourself and to continually be aware of, no matter what's going on in your mind, no matter what gestures you're doing, no matter what your stomach's doing, you have simply, it's like this still place back in your consciousness. They don't like to say mind and stuff. Your consciousness that you are simply there. It's like an objective observer and a continual remembrance that you're there. And I go, yeah. It's a focusing of attention. You understand, even if it is literally the same thing, you understand it's not the same thing. That is their tradition, that is their practice, that is their magical chant. The words self-remembering. And I say, well, it's focused attention. That is almost blasphemous. Because for something to be, for it to be an apparently simple and approachable method, it has to feel magical to the people involved. And for me to say, if I tried to say, or to point at somebody, would you understand, I'm not arguing with your words, but what you're calling self-remembering is focused attention. It's not. And if I made that kind of person see it, I wouldn't have accomplished anything. I would have probably ruined them. They probably couldn't go back anymore. And they go, well, gee, I would have shot their wild duck. And that's not the intent. But you understand, even if I'm telling you exactly the truth, that they are precisely the same thing, it's not the same thing to ordinary minds, even to ordinary would-be mystical minds. The practice has to apparently be simple, and it has to apparently be magical. And for it to be magical, it has to be incomparable. We'll have to pick it up again next time, unless I'm fortunate enough to die, and then I'll leave it up to you to try and close the fucking coffin. Damn coffin.